One of the other things that you are such a great proponent of is education. I know I've taken
Yes.
several of your
Yes. Oh,
classes at the real estate school, and you've just been great. And that's why I think
thank
your
you.
theme,
Thank
back to
you.
basics, is just so on brand for you
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
perfect because some of these classes have been continuing education and things, oh, you're thinking that I've already done that,
hmm
but in our industry that's ever changing, certainly there's new things to be aware of
Yeah. Or you
and
just need a refresher on
a great
things. Yeah.
refresher, yeah, of things you're not doing. What are some of your favorite classes to
Yeah.
teach?
Yeah. So, well, my favorite class, I will tell you, is I do one on stigmatized properties.
Oh, isn't
Which is
that
really
interesting?
fun
I have
because
to sign up for
it's one of
that.
those you should, yeah. It's one of those topics. It's like it's like a paragraph in your textbook when you go to your real estate classes,
Uh-huh.
but you don't really think about it in depth at all. And so it's a really fascinating area. There's been a lot of interesting legal cases, some that have gone to the Supreme Court. I'll give you a little teaser. There's one in New York City, or in New York, where the Supreme Court declared a house legally haunted.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so just things like that that I just think are really fascinating. But
Yes.
again, just not something that you would run into on your day to day. So it's a great continuing ed topic.
Do you remember what the
Um,
criteria was that pushed it to officially?
yeah, basically the owner had advertised for many years that the house was haunted. She had written journal articles like in Reader's Digest, and the house was included on like home tours of like supernatural
Mhm.
hotspots and things. And then when she went to sell it, she was silent on that. And
Mm.
so, of course, the buyer found out and said, well, we want to get out of the contract because of that. And it went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court basically said, because you advertise this property as being haunted for so long, as a matter of law, this house is haunted.
Wow.
It's funny, like I show like the headlines from the newspapers the day after, and it's like court believes in ghosts is like the headline.
Oh my gosh.
Because yeah, it was like a very interesting case, and so we look at a lot of things like that. There was a very prominent one in Pennsylvania that went to the PA Supreme Court that was over the course of like 7 or 8 years. It just wound its way through the different court systems because people kept appealing. But in that one, there was a murder suicide in a house, and investor bought it and kind of bought it for cheap because of that murder suicide, and then did a little bit of a rehab, put it back on the market, and sold it to somebody that was moving from out of state.
Mm.
And so the person that was moving had no idea that there was a murder suicide in the house,
Oh, and they
and
didn't
and
disclose
so no, it
that.
wasn't disclosed.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be. That's the interesting thing is like there's no
Right.
law in Pennsylvania that says you have to disclose a death in the home or any type of
Mhm.
stigmatizing event. And so this person sued, and they eventually lost the buyer because there's no
Interesting.
law there. But it's just the fact that it went through so many different
It went that
levels of
far.
appeal and all the way up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, made it a really big deal. So
That's really
yeah, I've
interesting.
always thought that was an interesting topic,
It
and
is.
again, just not something that most people are going to see on their day to day. Although I think everybody's probably sold a house where somebody passed
Or
away.
something happened,
Yeah, you
sure.
sold an estate or something like that.
Right.
So
Well, I'll add murder suicide cases to beyond the contract
yeah,
topics. I didn't have that on the original docket, but
yeah,
there we go. But it's interesting, you bring up a great ethics point of, well, the law is not required to disclose
yeah,
because I believe it reads as any, material or any item that affects the
yeah.
material
Material
defect
defect,
of
right?
the home. But in a case like that, where it has been publicized or it happened, um, that it could affect the client's decision-making process. And to
Absolutely.
save yourself a lot of grief and aggravation and stress, you probably want to lean always on the side of disclosure.
And honestly, that's exactly what I say in my classes
Mhm.
because it's not required, but who wants to be dragged through the court system for 7 or 8 years,
Right?
right? I mean, just
Costly expense and the
yeah.
stress and
So yeah, I always am a big proponent of disclosing or over disclosing things like that, because people will find out, as soon as they move in, the neighbor comes over, oh, you bought the murder house. Like,
Right.
you know, it, you're gonna find out at some
Right,
point.
right. Yeah, I've
So,
dealt with a few of those properties, and we've had the conversation about it. It can be challenging, and but then the buyer takes their own course,
mhm.
right? They say, you know what, this is just flat out not for me. I even had someone bring in a medium to
Oh,
walk
that's
through the
fun.
house
Yeah.
and talk through it with them, but that suited that buyer, and that's what they wanted,
Mhm.
and we were all protected in that way because we had that conversation and
Yeah.
she was able to perform the inspections or whatever she needed to, have that done. So it covers you.